This is the second tutorial on arrays. Referring back to the program I was just making, we have made an array of integers, we have made an array of strings. I'll go ahead and copy my last button and lay it down. And let's go back to our notes to see what the content is in our notes, and we'll work through that. So the next thing I have here for buttons is create a simple array. Let's see if it's worth doing. It shows how we can hard code all the values in an array. And actually that would be kind of a nice thing to do. I'm going to right click here. I will copy that line. I love my goldfish and my goldfish bowl. Now, if you don't like that message, you can go ahead and change it. But the idea here is how to hard code an array. Now, what I mean by that is we're going to declare an array and put everything into it right on its line of declaration. So one way I can do it is just as I have done here. I'll just paste this code here and you guys can take a look at it. I'm going to say dim. Now when we see the parentheses, we know within the language of Visual Basic we're talking about an array. We know that's going to happen. You will notice there is no number here. But yet on the end here I'm setting it equal to something. And when you set it equal to something, you always lay down an opening brace and a closing brace. And when I say brace, I'm talking about just like you use in mathematics where you use it for sets. You have an opening set bracket and a closing set bracket. So whatever is opened must be closed at its end. And I come in with these words, I, and I separate that with a comma. So this is the first value to go into the array. By the way, where does I go into if it's the first value to go in? It will go in at index 0, won't it? And I is, to use its terminology, what do I refer to the word I as? It is a what? Does anybody remember the word? It is an element. And the word love is an element, and the word my is an element. Elements are those things that go into the array. The index is where they're at. So what is the index of love? What index would love be at? It'd be the second thing in the array, but what's its index value? It'd be at index 1. So always remember to start counting at 1. So the next thing I've got there is my goldfish and my goldfish bowl. Now I told you earlier that whenever you declare an array, you must do three things. You must have a name for the array, you must give it size, and you must also say what the data type is. Now here I see what the name is, and I also see the type, but I'm not really seeing the size here. How is size known by what I've done here? You have actually listed out everything in the array. You've gone one step further. Not only have you said how many things are in here, which Visual Basic can easily count between the commas, it sees that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things here. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things here in your array. It's set up the size just by reading the number of things that you have here. So you have given size. You have even said what's actually going to be in there. So now on the next line, if I want to, I can actually add everything to my list box just as I've done before. What's another line of code I'm going to need if I'm going to add everything to my list box? Yeah, that'd be a good thing to do. Let's say listbox one.items.clear. Let's clear off everything, and now let's declare a variable so that we can have a counter. Now I use I a lot when I deal with arrays. There's no reason why you have to use it. You could use A, and you could use B, and you could use C. All of that would work. But I'll tell you, a lot of computer programmers are going to start off with the variable I, especially when they start working with arrays. And then the next one they're going to use, if they need another index, is going to be J. And they usually count up from I. And I don't know what the reason is, but it's just something we do. So if you want to do it like the pros do it, call it an I as integer. Now let's add everything to the array on the next line. What's my next word going to be on this line? For what? What is the whatever? Be careful. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What I tell you is you can't screw up, because if you do, you're going to have a really hard crash. We just talked about that. So a safe thing to do is always to number it. That'd be index 0, right? Love is going to be at index 1. My is going to be at index 2. Goldfish is at index 3. And my is at index 4. And goldfish is at 5. So you're correct if you say it's 5. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things going into my array, but that means I'm only specifying indices 0 through 5. And it will always be 1 less than the number of items you put into the array. That will be your last index. Do you understand? Okay, so now let's go ahead and just say what we just found out. We're going to go up to 5. And I'm going to say next I. And now I'm going to say listbox1.items.add. Let's display the items in the array. What do I write here if I want to display the items in the array? My string, then what? Parentheses, and in the parentheses I write I. And that's the trick that's going to get us through all the items in the array. Let's see if that works. And it says, I love my goldfish and my goldfish bowl, and you can see that it worked out perfectly because of the way that we counted. Now, it might be that you don't have the same number of variables here if you had an issue, so it is a good idea to count a little bit before you actually do this. So just make sure that you're able to count successfully. Might have been you forgot a comma. You got to have the commas in the same places. Each of these items up here have to be separated with a comma, and they have to be in quotes. So that might be another issue that you're running into if there's any problems. Now, sometimes it's a little bit hard to count up to 5. That was kind of a pain in the neck to go through here and count everything in my array. So we have a trick for dealing with it. I'm going to have Visual Basic, when I run this program, tell me how many items are in that array. So I'm going to say message box. The name of the array is my string. You can do this for all arrays. If you lay down a period now, one of the items that we've got here is length. And length is going to tell me how many items are in the array. So let's go ahead and try that. We just counted this. We see that there are 5 things in the array. Does everybody see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, or excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 things in the array, but we start at index 0 and we go up to index 5. That's how we get the 6 things. Does everybody see that? Let's go ahead and rebuild this. So guys, when I click that, how many items are in the array before I click it? How many items are in this array? We're going 0 to 5. How many items is that? It's 6. Do you see that's why I get the 6? Now, I got to ask you, do you think it would work if I use that word length here instead of the 5? If I write the word length here, am I going to have any trouble? If I say length, if I say myString.length, that's going to be a 6, isn't it? And I can't have that. But it's length anyway related to this number. It's going to be -1, isn't it? Can you see that if I write myString.length and then always subtract 1 from it, if you just use that simple trick, you'll never have to sit there and count the number of things in your array. It'll just know. Do you understand? So that's going to save me a little bit of time. I'd much rather write this than have to go through and count all of these things. That would drive me nuts, especially if I had a list of thousands of things I wanted to add. That'd take you a while. So this is going to save us a little bit of time. So now when I go to run it, I can automatically have it count the number of things in the array if I subtract 1. But if you slip up, and let me rim out this business of message box, and you say you're going to my length, we're going to run into that problem where you try to open up a drawer that isn't there, and you are going to have a very hard and very nasty crash. My program just locked up. You can't do that. You got to make sure you always say -1 if you go up to the array dot length. Is everybody okay with that? Now, question? Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. It's probably just some simple typing error. The important thing is at this point, you just get the idea behind what we're doing. Let's move on to the next thing that we've got in the notes to see what else we've got there. Now, the next thing I do is I create an array that's quite a bit bigger. I'm going to make an array now of 100 things. That's a pretty big step up. And I am going to randomly generate numbers and just throw them in there. I'm just going to pick them and throw them in there. Let's see 100 numbers randomly generated just for fun. I'm going to come back down here and I'll put another button on my form. Let's see if we can pick 100 numbers in an array and display them in the label. And I bet some of you might be able to do this. Now, by the way, I think this has something to do with a lab that's coming up. So you may see a connection between this and an upcoming lab. And I'll say here, generate 100 random numbers. Now, let's double click on this. I want exactly 100 random numbers. I don't want one more. I don't want one less. Let's make 100. So let's first do the declaration that declares that array. What would that declaration look like? First word? Dim. Dim what? Okay, I'll go ahead and declare the index as integer. Now let's go ahead and declare the array itself. What do you want to call this array? We can call it anything we want. What should we call it? How about X? You guys are crazy about X. We'll just call it X. Now, what am I going to write after this? Is it the number 100? What does that give me? That would give me 99 things? 100 will give me 101 things, but if I ask for 99, I always get one more than I ask for, so that should give me exactly 100 things. Everybody understand? After this, what do I write? It's actually numbers that I'm generating, so let's just say they're integers. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and first select the numbers and we'll put them in the array, and then after we do that in a loop, we'll have another loop which displays them. So we'll have one loop for getting them and another loop for displaying them. So I'll say for I equals, where do I start, guys? What am I going to write here? 0. You always start at 0, usually working with arrays. 2, what? Last available index, but let's use that slick new way we just discovered of finding that last index. So what would I write here? Length. How do you get it length? Yeah, but now here the array is called X, so we're going to say X dot, there it is, length. You see that? Now, what else do I need to do to this? -1, and that's going to fix that being one too big deal that we run into before. Let's say next to I here, and then between the parentheses, let's go ahead and select the numbers randomly. So I'm going to say that X of I is equal to this random number. And I know a little trick for picking a random number. I'll say int, parentheses, RND. RND is a number between 0 and 1. It's going to be a decimal, a tiny decimal. It can be terrible, like 0.0942786, like that. And when I take it times some number, like say 1,000, it's going to generate the numbers from 0 to 999. But I want the numbers from 1 to 1,000. So to adjust that, I'm going to say on the outside +1. And that is going to give me the numbers 1 to 1,000. So that's going to be the size of the numbers. Now that actually created the number. It picked a random number to begin with. Unfortunately, everybody's random numbers are going to be the same unless we say before we enter that loop where we find that random number, we use a command. Does anybody remember that command? It's randomize. That's the command we've used before. This is going to make everybody's results different. So randomize kind of juggles the dice so nobody gets the same result. Without it, we would all get the same random results if we asked for the same information. Every time, we'd always get the same thing, which makes it not seem too terribly random if you did it. Now, let's have another loop here that actually adds everything. We just picked 100 numbers. We put them into the array. Now let's take those 100 numbers and we're going to display them in the list box. This is going to prove our array works. Do you understand? So I'm going to say I equals what? 0 to where? X dot length minus 1. Isn't that such a cool trick? But you could also write, same thing. This is the same thing as saying what? 99, right? We know that. We could have written it if we wanted to. Again, I'm going to say next I. Now let's add it to the list box. What's the line of code that adds it to the list box? List box 1 dot items dot add, and the item we're adding is what? X what? X of I. Now that should do it. Let's clean it up just a little bit. Let's clear off the screen. We'll say listbox 1 dot items dot add, or items dot clear, so that we don't see all the garbage from all the other buttons we've been displaying. And with that, I think we've got a pretty good little program. So if I rebuild it and run it, there's our 100 random numbers. And we can do one better. We can actually see the indices as we get those. Let's add the indices just before we display the names. So the index, you guys have learned from the address or the dictionary, is I. And to that, I'm going to concatenate a space. And to that, I will concatenate the number. I might even put a little period here. So I see the index, and my first index should be at index 0. So when I click this, there you go, 0 to 99. 100 numbers. You can see it really does work. Now what's the only thing you have to do to see, say, 1,000 numbers? What's the only thing I have to do? What's the only thing I have to do, guys? 1,000 numbers in my array. Yeah, what's my declaration going to be if I want to see 1,000 numbers? 999. And this is going to read how many numbers I've got in my array. It will display now 1,000 numbers. Let's see if it works. Isn't this cool? It's just so automatic. It just runs with it. There is 1,000 numbers. Did that pretty quick. What's the biggest number we can put in there? Let's keep playing with this. Now I got 9,099. Will it do that? It had to think about it a little bit. It's starting to slow down. It's because of that screen refresh. Every time we add a new number, our list box is having to refresh. When you do that about 10,000 times, you're going to start to see it. Now, if you want, I can't think of any way adding it to the list box so that we see it and it doesn't slow our program down. But what we can do is we can see after it's added all of those items how long it took to do. So I could just write the word here, done. And just for fun, let's make 1 million items going into the array. And if I wanted to make 1 million, I probably wouldn't have to write 1 million here. It would be 1 less than that. I can write it this way, 1 million minus 1. Visual Basic is smart enough. It can do math. So if I rebuild this and I run it, and notice I'm not adding it to my list box now. How much faster is it going to do 1 million numbers? I click it. You see how fast that happened? It was like, boom, done. Because it's doing about 1 billion calculations per second. Why, you could do something 1,000 times faster than this if it wanted to. Almost. Real close to that. You're really going to see things start to slow down as we get up to 1 billion. At any rate, today, that concludes my tutorial. I hope you enjoyed that.